Hi, welcome to episode 4 of Mortal Musings, the chronicle of my thoughts, feelings, emotions, and fight to survive as I confront the realization of having stage 4 cancer, in this case, renal transitional cell carcinoma. Before I get into today's deep thoughts, I'll give you an update on my situation. For those of you who've been following, last Friday I went in for the results of my PET scan and to get the second round of chemo. As I talked about in the last Mortal Musings, I had a very weird reaction to the PET scan. I had a panic attack when I had the PET scan done, and this is something completely out of character for me. I've had dozens and dozens of CAT scans and MRIs and never had a reaction to them at all. But this one was different. I literally panicked. I had to be consoled and actually had to have the technician come in there and basically hold my hand during the process. So what was freaking me out? It wasn't the physicality of the situation or the claustrophobia. I mean, this was not that scary a machine compared to what I've been used to. I attributed it instead to psychological. Deep down in the subsurface of my brains, I was scared to death, not of the scan, but what it meant and what it could potentially reveal. Well, unfortunately, my body knew more than my conscious mind. The PET scan, in fact, did reveal that the cancer has spread more so than we had thought. They found 3 more hot spots throughout my chest, one of which in the medial sternum area is clearly not operable. So that was not good news, but at the same time, it really didn't change anything because operation was not really being considered anyway. So the treatment is the same regardless of what the PET scan shows. In fact, it just means that the greater the challenge, the greater the adventure, and the greater the accomplishment will be when we beat this thing, and we will. The other thing that happened Friday, which is perhaps a little bit more disturbing to me at the time, was the fact that they couldn't do the chemo for me on Friday because my kidney functions were too low. So they ended up giving me an IV. This was a risk going in because one of the drugs that they have me on can impact kidney functions. And the truth is, I may only be working on one kidney anyway because of the tumor in the left kidney. And I think, in fact, that's true because the bleeding stopped in July, so I think that was a sign that the kidney shut down. But nonetheless, it was disturbing that I couldn't have that treatment because I felt the treatment was doing some good. And so to be saying, no, we're not going to do it this week was disappointing. Instead, they gave me IV, so I still got to have the pleasure of sitting there for hours and hours, but no treatment. But that's okay because they'll do it to me this week. So it's not that big a deal. It was just a week delayed. But what it did mean is that now my wonderful sister gets to have the privilege of taking me there for my next round of chemo. In fact, this is how I knew that I was in really serious condition when a few weeks ago, not one, but both of my sisters volunteered and just said they wanted to come visit me. Now, to put this in perspective, my sisters and I, for all but a 7.5-year period, have lived in different parts of the country for the last 40 years. From 2008 to last year, we all lived in the Dallas area. But before that, I lived in North Carolina and Florida, and they were in the Dallas area or in Virginia or elsewhere. And in that 40-year period, each sister has visited me exactly once. And both of those occasions were before my 28-year-old son was born. So to have not one, but both of them suddenly decide, ooh, they need to come down and visit me and come see me now. Well, that probably scared me as much as anything. Not just the fact that they were coming, but the fact that they felt that they needed to come. But I am very, very grateful they are coming, especially this week, because of all the days in the year, this Friday is the worst day for me to have chemo from an impact standpoint, because my wife, who's the executive director of the National Civil War Naval Museum here in Columbus, this is their annual fundraiser, Friday, the one big event of the whole year they've been planning for months and months and months. And for her to have to leave and not be there to take me to Atlanta essentially all day and probably miss most of it at night would have been horrific for her. And she would have done it, but it would have been horrific and certainly least desirable outcome. So the fact that my sister Cheryl happens to be coming this weekend was extremely fortuitous. Of course, she may not think so when she has to realize that we have to leave here at 5:30 in the morning in order to get to Atlanta by 8 in the morning. So, and that's, of course, an hour later than we're on Eastern time. She's used to Central time, so we're essentially leaving at 4:30 in the morning, her time. So, oh well, thanks, Cheryl. What I really want to talk about today is perspective. Now, perspective has been one of those cornerstone concepts of my life. I have relied on the concept of perspective throughout my life to help me, to get me through the many, many dark periods that I have gone through. But I also think that my understanding of perspective, or in developing perspective, has really helped me become a better person in many different ways. It's not just a coping method, it's a way of understanding. In fact, I believe that it allows me to take a more holistic approach to problems that other people do. Most people tend to be distracted by one element or another element that happens to stick out, whereas I like to take things as a more holistic approach, because I fully appreciate the great interactions that happen when you get many pieces putting together. It's certainly been true for me and my golf consulting, that taking a holistic approach to the entirety of a golf operations rather than focusing on just, say, one element, whether it be marketing or design or operations, et cetera, et cetera. I look at the totality of things. When we're talking about perspective, I'm not necessarily talking just about perceptual perspective, but perspective is influenced by everything. It's not just the physical senses, it's emotional, it's the background, it's psychological, it's certainly intellectual, your life experiences. Everything influences perspective. You know, as a psychologist way back when, I learned very easily how we can deceive our perceptions. Our physical senses are easily tricked. Magicians know this. We've all seen optical illusions. We're all kind of mystified and we kind of chuckle, hey, ha, 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 I was fooled, I didn't see that, da, 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 da. But we don't really take that to heart. We don't really understand that, hey, we're constantly being tricked by our physical senses. So how do we know what to trust? Well, there's another thing about perspective. There is no real right or wrong answer. They're just different perspectives. And my feeling is that while every perspective is different, no one perspective holds the truth as a whole. In fact, it's only by putting the variety of different perspectives together that you can ever hope to get closer to reality, to know what's really going on. You have to look at things from multiple perspectives. Imagine you're a fruit fly. Fruit fly lives 24 hours. That's some 20,000 times less than what we live. You think that for them, a minute may have a different meaning to them than to a person that's going to live thousands and thousands of days. It changes your perspective. Just like having the thought that, hey, your life may be suddenly coming to an abrupt end, maybe within a year, changes your perspective versus not having to worry about it and feeling, oh, hey, I got 30 years to go. Don't worry about it now. So yeah, that changes your perspective. But, the thing about perspective, again, everybody's perspective is different. You can take two people, even two people with similar backgrounds, you can put them in an environment and have them both witness the same thing, and they're going to come out with very different descriptions of those events. That's just reality. And the reason is because everything they experience is influenced by their own personal history. Their physical senses may be different. They're viewing it from slightly different angles, but they also have different interpretations based on their experiences, their emotions, their psychology, what have you. So how does that help me? How does that change what I'm going through? Well, the key for me is to realize that my individual perception of things is just a sliver. It's just a fraction of what is real. So if I want to look at things, I need to look at things in terms of a holistic view of the world in general, not just as it influences me at this moment in time. So when you look at things from a broader perspective, how's this disease impacting the world in general? Well, who cares what's happening to me except outside a few close friends and families? It's not that important in the world great scheme of things. It may seem demoralizing, but at the same time, it makes you understand that there's a lot more to life than life. Perspective also helps me realize that you don't want to live only in the moment, because if you live just in the moment, then that moment tends to accelerate in its importance. And you lose that perspective of the importance of that moment in your overall history. I've been through, as has everybody, been through tough times. And that's one perspective that people don't appreciate. There's not a person out there, not a human being out there that hasn't had bad things go wrong to them. Things that for them at that moment in time was the worst thing could ever happen. Certainly if you're a teen, you get the perspective, hey, Johnny didn't call. It's the worst thing that's ever happened. The world coming to an end. Oh my God. Or I lost my cell phone. I can't communicate. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Part of that is because we react as children or what have you so strongly to these things that as adults we look back and we laugh at, is because they don't have that perspective. They don't have the experience as to how bad this is in relationship to the crap that you're going to go through later on in life. So naturally, we respond to it as being major because relative to the things that we've experienced in the past, it was major. And to the degree that we are focused only inward, then the things that happen to us as individuals become over magnified because our looking glass is focused just on the narrow. So I learned actually very young, because I had a horrible childhood, emotionally, psychologically. So part of my escape mechanism was to try to put whatever was happening to me that day into a broader perspective. I said, And I would ask myself the question, is this something, so somebody picked on me. Is this something that I'm going to really worry about next week? Is it something I'm going to remember next month, next year? How really important is that one event going to be in the scope of my entire life? And that helps when you start thinking in terms of, well, it seems really bad now and it really hurts now. Will I even think about it in a year from now, or 2 or 5? Then you start to realize, well, maybe it's not that bad at all. And then you open your eyes to what's going on with other people. And you start to realize that, hey, you're not alone. Other people go through this same crap. They handle it. It's eye-opening when you go into the Winship Cancer Center and you go in there, you're scared and you're thinking, oh my God, I may be dying. And then you see people that are, they've lost their hair, they're in wheelchairs, and clearly these people are much, much further along in their journey than I am. And you start to think, I'm not there yet. These people, they've got it a lot worse than I do. They're surviving. They're here. And it's true. I don't care how bad a situation you're in. If you look around, look hard enough, there's always going to be people that are in far worse situations. People who've experienced worse or feeling worse or in tragic situations. We don't have to look far in this world to find that. So part of what helps get me through things is to look at what I am experiencing relative to what other human beings are experiencing. And really, it's minor. I mean, I'm hopeful. I don't have the, somebody's going to tell me that I'm going to die in 2 days. I don't have, worry about where my food is coming from. I don't have people beating on me. I still have most of my senses and most of my physical abilities. Compared to what others are going through, mine is relatively minor. I can get through this. That's not to say I'd rather not be going through this. That's obvious. Nobody wants to suffer. But I think it's something that we as human beings are designed to do. I think that's part of our life mission, is to learn how to deal with pain and to deal with suffering, whether it's our own personal suffering or those of people that are around them. I am extremely fortunate in that I've got a wonderful family. My wife is a true saint. I worry about her and all she's taking on, and we'll probably have a Immortal Musings about the impact of this stuff on family, because certainly it impacts them as much, in some ways worse, than it impacts me. But I feel very fortunate in that. And now that I have these Mortal Musings going on, I feel maybe I'm contributing something and can turn this into a positive. That's what a wonderful thing to do, is change your perspective. So when things get bad, or when things get stale, or when you just need to change things up a bit, try changing your perspective. Try looking at things from another person's point of view. How do they look at things? If you try to identify with their background, their feelings, their experiences, and look at the same things, you might come to understand a different point of view. And that always helps to gain understanding. Or it doesn't have to be changing your perspective in terms of people. You can look at things from a zoom out. Look at things from a macro standpoint, holistic standpoint. How important is this thing really? Or how does it integrate with everything else that's going on, trying to mesh the gears, so to speak? That certainly helps you gain a better understanding of the way the world works. Or change your time perspective. Try jumping ahead in time and then looking backwards. How does that moment in time really going to impact your life as a whole? And to do this, you might have to jump ahead more than just a day or two, but look ahead a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. How important is it really in this life that you're journeying on? Anyway, that's today's thought perspective. Hope it helps. It helped me.